I was sitting at the kitchen table with a lukewarm cup of tea when my phone buzzed. It was Leighton, 46 p.m. The kind of hour when texts only bring bad news. The screen lit up with her name, Rachel. My thumb hovered over the notification, hope flickering against years of distance. Maybe she was reaching out. Maybe this was it, the thaw. I tapped the screen. I need space. Please stay out of my life. Just 10 words. No punctuation at the end. As if finality didn't need it. My eyes scanned the sentence again, then again, as if reading it enough times might change it. My chest tightened, not in the way it does with age, but like a door slamming shut from the inside. No warning, no explanation, just the cold steel of exclusion dressed up like polite detachment. I didn't reply. What would I even say? My hands trembled slightly as I set the phone down next to the half-eaten oatmeal cookie I suddenly had no appetite for. I stared at the wallpaper Rachel had helped pick out back in 3, little blue stripes faded by years of sunlight. Her laugh had echoed in this kitchen. Her bare feet had padded across these floors. And now stay out of my life. The old clock above the sink ticked loud in the silence. I waited for a follow-up message, something softer, something that explained the first. Nothing came. The house felt colder than it had in years, like even the air had recoiled from me. I stood, walked to the living room, and lowered myself into the recliner, the one Emma used to curl into during those long chemo nights. I looked at the photo of her on the mantel, our wedding day, her smile so sure, so knowing. She told me to stay out. I whispered to the room, my voice catching. Emma stared back silently, the way she always did when words failed me. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the dead leaves on the porch. Winter was coming early this year. I could feel it, in my bones, in my heart, in the space where my daughter used to live. She came into this world screaming and kicking, and I swear from that very first cry, I knew she'd be the center of my life. Rachel Ann Miller, born June 14, 1991, 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a pair of lungs that could wake the dead. Emma held her first, her face pale with exhaustion but radiant with love. I hovered close, useless and overwhelmed, until Emma smiled weakly and said, "Go on, Thomas, meet your girl." From that moment on, it was the two of us. After Emma passed 3 years later, cancer eating through her like fire in dry grass, I didn't know how to be both father and mother. But I tried. God knows I tried. I learned how to braid hair from a YouTube video on a dial-up connection. I packed lunches with little notes that said things like, "You got this, Peanut," and walked her to school even when she begged me not to. Dance recitals, scraped knees, night terrors. I was there for all of it. I still remember one night when she was 6, the power went out during a thunderstorm. She ran into my room, her favorite blanket in one hand, eyes wide with fear. "Will the house fall down?" she asked. I scooped her up and said, "Not while I'm in it, sweetheart." I worked construction during the day, finished paperwork at night, and learned the art of sleeping in 5-hour stretches. I missed dates, reunions, and most of my 20s, but I never missed a parent-teacher conference. When she got her first A in science, we went for pancakes. When she got her heart broken at 17, I sat on her bed and listened for 3 hours straight while she sobbed about a boy named Kyle who played guitar and didn't deserve her. Emma had warned me once gently that Rachel might grow to resent my overprotectiveness. "Just don't make her your whole world, Tom," she'd said, eyes tired but kind. "She's meant to fly one day." But I couldn't help it. Rachel was my world. She was all that was left of Emma, and all that felt right in a life built on loss. Now, looking back from the silence of this old house, I wonder if I held on too tightly, if love, when gripped too hard, turns into something else, something that drives people away. It started small. That's how it always does, doesn't it? You don't notice the drift when it's just a few extra days between phone calls, or when a text reply takes until morning instead of showing up before dinner. After Rachel graduated, the changes were subtle at first. She took a job in the city marketing assistant at some startup with a rooftop break room and kombucha on tap. She sounded excited when she first told me. I was proud, I really was. But then the phone calls turned into voicemails, and the voicemails turned into silence. And then she met Eric. I'll admit, I was cautious from the beginning. He had that kind of charm that felt practiced, too smooth, the handshake with just a bit too much squeeze, the compliments that never landed quite right. "Rachel talks about you all the time," he said the first time we met, but there was a flicker in his eyes like he was scanning for cameras, something performative. Still, I smiled and played the part, because Rachel looked happy, and that mattered more than anything else. After Eric, the invitations slowed. I'd call on a Sunday and get a polite excuse, "We're heading out to brunch. We've got a double date tonight. I'll call you later this week." Weeks would go by, then months. She said they were busy with work, with planning, with life stuff. I understood, or at least I told myself I did. Young people build their own lives, just like we did once, Emma and I. But understanding didn't quiet the ache in my chest every time I set a place at the table and cleared it untouched. It didn't help when her voicemail started saying, "Hey, it's Rach, leave a message," instead of, "Hey, it's Rachel and Eric," like maybe I wasn't supposed to hear his name every time I reached out. She wasn't angry. That's the strange part. It wasn't a fight. No door slammed. No cruel words exchanged. Just silence growing like a crack in drywall thin at first, then spreading wide enough to let all the warmth leak out, and I couldn't stop it, couldn't patch it, could only sit and watch as the girl who once needed me for everything now didn't seem to need me at all. I remember that Thanksgiving like it happened 5 minutes ago. I'd called Rachel the week before. No answer. Left a message, kept it simple, just said I was thinking about her, hoped she was doing well, and that I missed her pumpkin pie. I didn't expect much. But as the holiday crept closer and the house grew quieter, I started to feel like I was waiting for something that wasn't coming. So I packed up a Tupperware of mashed potatoes and the cranberry sauce Emma used to make, and I drove the 2 hours to the city. Traffic was light. I told myself maybe this would be a good surprise, that maybe she just needed a reminder of home, of family, of me. I pulled into her street right around 4:30. The sun was dipping behind the skyline, casting long shadows over rows of identical brick townhouses. Hers had a wreath on the door, probably Eric's idea, with its carefully coordinated fall colors and burlap ribbon. I knocked, heard footsteps, then silence. When she finally opened the door, her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Dad? What are you doing here?" I held up the bag of food like some kind of peace offering. "Thought I'd stop by. I didn't want you spending Thanksgiving alone." "We're not alone," she said quickly, glancing over her shoulder. "Eric's family is here, his parents, his sister." I peered inside. Laughter drifted from the dining room, a table full of strangers, my daughter's new family. I wasn't on the guest list. "Oh," I said, "well, I won't stay. Just wanted to drop this off." I handed her the bag. She took it like it was fragile or radioactive, something she didn't quite know what to do with. She stepped outside and closed the door behind her, muffling the laughter. "You really should have called first." "I did," I said gently. "You didn't answer." She looked down. "Things are just complicated." I nodded. That word, complicated. Always the excuse when people don't want to say what they really mean. She gave me a quick, awkward hug. No warmth in it. Then she turned back toward the door. "Thanks for coming, Dad. I'll call you later, okay?" I stood on her porch for a few seconds after she went back in. The smell of turkey in the air, muffled laughter through the windows, and me, outside, like a ghost. Some nights, I lie awake staring at the ceiling, the fan spinning slow above me, making that soft whirring sound that used to lull me to sleep. But now it only reminds me of time passing, seconds dripping like a leaky faucet. And in that quiet, my mind always goes back to the same question: what did I do wrong? I've gone back through every old email Rachel ever sent me, every birthday thank you, every holiday plan, every love you dad signed at the bottom like it still meant something. I even found one from her first week at college. She'd written, "I miss home so much it hurts, love you more than pancakes." That line made me smile back then. Now it just breaks something in me. I scroll through old texts sometimes. The messages grow shorter as the years go by. The exclamation points vanish. The emojis disappear. Eventually, it's just logistics. Will you be around Saturday? Or, can you send me that tax form? Until even that stops. Now if I text her, it sits unread for days. Sometimes never opened. I replay conversations in my head like old radio tapes. Did I talk too much about Emma? Did I bring her up too often? Was I too firm about money? About Eric? Was I too soft? Did I say something without realizing it? The kind of small cut that festers with time. There's no one to ask. The house is too quiet for that. Joe from the diner always says, "Don't blame yourself for a grown child's choices," but Joe's daughter still brings him pie every Sunday. Mine sends silence. It's not anger I feel most, it's doubt. That corrosive, whispering kind of doubt that wears down a man more than hard labor ever did. I spent 30 years holding hammers and lifting beams, but nothing's heavier than not knowing why the person you raised like your own heartbeat wants nothing to do with you. And the worst part is, I'd apologize, even if I didn't know what for. I'd get down on my knees if it would make things right. But you can't fix something you can't see, and Rachel's silence is a wall I can't climb. Eric came into Rachel's life like a well-dressed question mark. Tall, clean-shaven, always polite. The kind of man who smiled with his mouth but never his eyes. I remember the first time she brought him home, it was Emma's birthday. Rachel knew I'd spend it alone, so she showed up with a bottle of wine and a man who looked like he had somewhere better to be. He shook my hand like he was closing a deal. "It's an honor to meet you, sir." Sir, nobody had called me that since my construction foreman days. He complimented the house, the food, even the porch swing I'd built the summer before Rachel left for college. But it all felt rehearsed, like he'd practiced the lines in the car ride over. That night, after dinner, Rachel and Eric washed the dishes together, whispering and laughing in the kitchen. I sat on the couch, pretending to read while I listened. I wanted to like him. Really, I did. But something about him made the hairs on my neck rise, like the feeling you get when a storm's coming and the clouds haven't figured it out yet. He never asked questions about Rachel's childhood. Never brought up Emma, never wondered how I was holding up, living alone in a house filled with echoes. He was there for Rachel, and only Rachel. I was background noise. Over the years, his visits got shorter. At first, they stayed for weekends. Then it was just a few hours. Eventually, Rachel came a loner, not at all. I'd ask about Eric and she'd brush it off. He's busy or he sends his best, always from a distance. When I offered to help with wedding expenses, Eric insisted they had it covered. He thanked me, but not the kind of thank you that means gratitude, the kind that means don't interfere. I stepped back, told myself to respect boundaries, but the more I stepped back, the more Rachel stepped away. Eric was always calm, always measured. But behind that calm, I sensed something sharp, something calculating, like he was always doing the math, what mattered, what didn't. I never made it onto the spreadsheet. I wasn't family, I was an obligation. The man whose blessing he didn't need but asked for anyway, just for appearances. And Rachel followed his lead. I worked on the quilt for 3 weeks. Emma's old fabrics, florals, gingham, little sunflower, some pieces cut from dresses I still remembered her wearing. I hadn't opened that cedar chest in years. The smell hit me first, lavender and thyme. I ran my hands over the fabric like I was touching ghosts. Each square was stitched by hand. I did it in the evenings, with the TV humming in the background. Sometimes I'd pause, just to remember Emma at her sewing machine, humming softly, her brow furrowed in that way it always did when she was focused. The quilt was a gift, but it was also a way to feel close to them again, both of them. Rachel's birthday was coming up, 32. I wrapped the quilt in brown paper, tied it with twine like Emma used to, and slipped a note inside. Thought you might like something warm on cold nights. Your mother's hands are in every stitch. Love, Dad. I paid extra for overnight shipping, not because I was in a hurry, but because I wanted it there before the weekend. before the noise and the wine and Eric's perfect little toast. The tracking number said it was delivered at 3:27 p.m. the next day. And then, nothing. No text, no call, no thank you, not even a photo posted online. I waited, checking my phone more often than I'd admit. The days crawled by. I thought maybe she didn't see it. Maybe it got lost in the shuffle. Maybe she was busy. A week later, I sent a message. Did you get the package? 2 hours passed, then 3, then a day. Still nothing. The silence was louder than any word she could have sent. I sat on the couch that night, the one with the sagging cushion where Rachel used to curl up beside Emma with a book. I held my phone in my hand, watching the screen dim, then go dark. That quilt had taken me 21 days. She didn't take 5 seconds. I told myself it didn't matter, that the gift was from the heart, not for attention. But deep down, a part of me knew I'd sewn it with hope, and that hope had been folded and shelved without a glance. Joe slid into the booth across from me at the diner, 2 mugs of coffee already in hand. He always beat me there. "You look like hell," he said, not unkindly. "Something happen?" I shrugged. Rachel's birthday was last week. Joe stirred his coffee, watching me over the rim. He didn't need to ask the rest. He knew. I'd told him about the quilt, about the silence, about the way my daughter's love had started to feel like a bill I'd stopped paying. "She thank you?" he asked. I shook my head. "I don't even know if she opened it." Joe leaned back, sighing through his nose. He'd known Emma, been one of the first to visit after the funeral. He was there when Rachel took her first steps on the lawn, when she cried after scraping her knee at Little League. He remembered her as the girl who called me Daddy, like it was the most important word in her vocabulary. "Sometimes," Joe said slowly, "kids forget who raised them." The words landed harder than I expected. Simple, heavy, true. "She was my whole world," I said quietly. "Still is, I guess. But I don't know who she is anymore. Feels like I'm loving a ghost that doesn't remember me." Joe nodded, then took a sip of his coffee like he was bracing himself. "You didn't do anything wrong, Tom. You gave her everything. You kept going when most men would have crumbled. But that's the thing about kids who've always been carried. They forget what it took to hold them up." I stared out the diner window, watching the traffic roll by. Outside, a father knelt on the sidewalk, tying his son's shoe while the boy tugged at his hand impatiently. I wondered if that little boy would grow up to tell his dad to stay out of his life too. "She was sweet once," I said. "Used to hold my hand at the grocery store. Wouldn't let go unless I promised her a lollipop at checkout." "People change," Joe said. "Love don't. That's the curse." I didn't argue. I just sat there, nursing cold coffee, watching memories float to the surface like leaves in a storm drain. And bitterness. It doesn't show up all at once. It trickles in, a silence here, a forgotten thank you there, until suddenly, it's all you taste. The days started blending together like rain on the window pane, slow, colorless, and quiet. My world had shrunk to the size of this house. Breakfast at 7, coffee by 7:15, the same cracked mug Emma bought me for Father's Day back in 5. One Dad printed in faded red letters, the handle chipped but still holding strong. Like me, I suppose. I'd read the newspaper front to back, even the classifieds, even the obituaries. Then I'd water the garden, Emma's garden. Her roses were holding on, somehow, despite my best attempts to neglect them into peace. She'd had the magic touch, could make anything bloom. I just pulled weeds and hoped the ground remembered her better than I did. Some mornings I'd walk the perimeter of the backyard, not looking for anything, just pacing, counting steps like they meant something. Sometimes I sat on the porch and watched the neighbor's dog dig the same useless hole by their fence. I envied him. At least he looked like he had a purpose. Inside, the house stayed quiet, too quiet. I kept the television on in the background, sometimes weather reports, static-filled game shows, reruns of shows Emma used to like. I wasn't really watching, just listening, filling the silence with anything that didn't sound like my own thoughts. I spent longer and longer standing in front of the photo shelf. Emma in her Sunday dress, Rachel at age 5 with spaghetti sauce on her cheeks, the three of us on a fishing trip, soaked in rain but smiling like fools. I'd find myself tracing the edges of the frames without realizing it, like maybe the contact could bring them back. Once or twice I caught myself talking out loud, asking Rachel what her week looked like, telling Emma I'd fixed the gutter she used to complain about. I wasn't crazy, just lonely. There's a difference. You don't notice loneliness all at once. It sneaks in like dust on furniture fine, invisible, quiet, until one day you run your finger across the surface and see how thick it's gotten. Rachel's silence didn't just echo, it settled. In my bones, in the air, in every space where her voice used to live. It was the shoebox that finally did it. One of those old cardboard ones with Rachel's name scribbled on the lid in purple marker. I found it in the attic while trying to fix the insulation, something Emma had nagged me about for years. The box was filled with glittery birthday cards, school drawings, and tiny plastic hair clips I hadn't seen since she was 7. I sat on the attic floor, cross-legged like a man half his age, flipping through the paper trail of my daughter's childhood. A finger paint portrait labeled, "Me and Daddy," 2 misshapen stick figures with smiles the size of their heads. Her handwriting changed year by year, but the sentiment stayed the same. "I love you, Dad. You're the best dad ever. Please never die." I don't remember how long I sat there. Maybe an hour, maybe more. The sun had started to dip by the time I finally stood and carried the box downstairs. I laid it on the living room floor beside the hope chest Emma had once used for linens. Then I opened the closet and pulled down everything that still belonged to Rachel: her ballet shoes, an old winter coat, a stuffed giraffe missing one button eye. One by one, I packed them away. Not out of anger, not even out of pain, just exhaustion, the kind that lives deep in your chest when hope becomes too heavy to carry. I sealed the lid, pressed it down tight, and whispered, "Maybe this really is goodbye." There was no ceremony, no music swelling in the background, just the sound of cardboard scraping closed. I carried the chest to the attic, set it in the far corner, and dusted off my hands like I was finishing a job I hadn't wanted to start. Back downstairs, I made a cup of tea and sat in Emma's old chair, the one with the cushion that still smelled faintly of lavender. I didn't cry. Not then. Some part of me had already done all the crying it was going to do. Maybe one day she'd come back. Maybe not. But today, I let go not of her, but of the waiting, of the wondering. Some goodbyes don't come with doors slamming or tearful speeches. Some just settle into quiet and stay. The phone rang at 12:03 a.m. I woke up in the dark, the kind of thick, suffocating dark where you don't know what year it is for the first few seconds. I thought it might be a wrong number, or maybe Joe again. He gets lonely too sometimes, calls after a few too many beers, but when I saw the name on the screen, my breath caught. Eric. My thumb hesitated over the green button. I hadn't heard from him in nearly a year, not since the wedding photos were posted online, and I wasn't in a single one. I answered. All I heard was breathing at first. Then something like a choke, a sob, a muffled sound like someone trying not to fall apart. "Eric?" I said, my voice hoarse from sleep. "What's wrong?" He didn't answer right away. Just this broken, trembling noise, like a man who'd lost his footing in the dark and wasn't sure how to stand again. I sat up slowly, switched on the lamp. The light made the silence feel heavier. "She's gone," he finally said. I leaned forward. "What do you mean gone?" "Too. Don't know where she is." His voice cracked. "She just left. I woke up and she wasn't here. No note, no message. Her car's gone." I didn't speak. I waited, let the words settle like dust. I checked with her work. "She didn't show up yesterday," he continued, rushing now, frantic. "I've called everyone, her friends, co-workers, no one knows anything. She didn't take her phone charger. She didn't take her toothbrush. Just disappeared." My throat went dry. I tried to picture Rachel, driving into the night, alone. How long has she been missing? I think 2 days, maybe more. I gripped the receiver tighter. My heart wasn't racing, it was steady, heavy, like it knew something I didn't yet. I didn't know who else to call, Eric whispered. Of course he didn't. He'd built a wall between us, brick by brick, but now that it was crumbling, he came crawling over the rubble. I'll be there in the morning, I said. Okay, thank you. I hung up, sat in the glow of the lamp, stared at Rachel's photo on the mantel. She was smiling in it, but now she was gone. The drive to the city was quiet. No music, just the thrum of the tires and the occasional cough from the engine I still hadn't gotten looked at. I watched the world blur past the windshield billboards, gas stations, fast food signs glowing in the dawn mist. Everything moving, but me feeling like I was still back at that phone call. Eric answered the door looking like hell. His eyes were swollen, his hair unkempt, his shirt wrinkled and buttoned wrong. It was the first time I'd seen him disassembled. No smile, no performance. She's really gone, he said, voice hollow. I thought maybe she'd cool off, come back, but... He stepped aside, and I entered the apartment. Rachel's coat still hung on the hook by the door. Her keys weren't on the tray. A coffee cup sat half full on the counter, lip prints still on the rim. The kind of quiet that lived in the space told me this wasn't just a night away. This was something else. She didn't say anything? I asked. Not a word, he said, slumping into a chair like he'd been holding himself up too long. We weren't fighting. Not really. We'd been distant, I guess. She'd been quiet, jumpy. I thought it was work. I looked around. The place was too clean, too perfect. No chaos, no mess, no trace of where she might have unraveled. When was the last time you saw her? 3 nights ago. I was asleep. She was in the living room, reading, I think. I don't even remember saying goodnight. I walked to the window, stared out at the street. You call the police? They said she's an adult. Said unless there's a reason to suspect danger, she's just choosing to be gone. The words hit harder than they should have. Choosing to be gone. Was she? I turned to Eric. Were there signs? Anything at all? He looked at me, then away. She cried a lot. Thought I didn't notice. She started sleeping with the door locked. My stomach turned. She told me once, he whispered, that she didn't feel safe in her own life. I stared at him, a slow burning fear building in my chest. What the hell happened to my daughter? Eric sat on the edge of the couch like it might reject him at any second. His hands were clenched in his lap, knuckles white, eyes darting anywhere but mine. I could see the guilt before he even opened his mouth. The kind of guilt that doesn't come from a single mistake but 1,000 ignored warnings. I should have told you sooner, he said, voice raw. Things between me and Rachel, they weren't perfect. I didn't say anything, just let the silence stretch. It tends to do more work than words ever could. She changed, he continued, eyes fixed on a spot in the carpet. The last 6 months especially. She stopped laughing at my jokes, stopped making dinner plans, would go to bed early, close the door. Some nights I'd wake up and she wasn't in bed, just sitting on the balcony in her robe, staring into the dark like she was waiting for something. Or someone, I thought. She was jumpy, stressed, like everything was pressing in. Work was part of it. She said her boss kept moving the goalposts. But it wasn't just that. It was like she didn't know how to breathe anymore. I could feel my jaw tightening. And you didn't do anything? I asked, he said quickly. I tried. I offered to take a trip, told her we could get away for a weekend. She said no, said it would just follow her wherever we went. Eric rubbed his temples. I think I made it worse. I wanted to help, but I didn't know how to reach her, so I started pulling back too. He looked up at me then, and for once, the polish was gone. She used to light up a room, you know, but lately, it's like she dimmed, and I didn't know how to bring her back. The part he didn't say echoed louder than anything else. He didn't fight for her, and now she was gone. I stood in Rachel's living room while Eric collapsed into his silence again, but I wasn't still not inside. Something was waking up in me, something I hadn't felt since before retirement. That deep itch behind the ribs, that pull in the gut when something didn't add up. I'd spent 38 years as a high school principal, not the kind that sat behind a desk with a plaque and a coffee warmer. I was the kind who saw a bruise on a kid's wrist and asked the right questions. Who knew when a forged note meant more than just skipping class? Who read silence like a second language? I turned to Eric. We're going to figure this out. He blinked. How? We start from the beginning. I asked for her last week's schedule, her usual route to work, who she'd talked to, what she'd said. I took notes in the back of an envelope I found on the counter. I checked her calendar app, her messages, what little of it wasn't locked behind a password. You said she cried a lot, I asked. When did that start? About 3 months ago, he said. Around the time she got passed over for that promotion. She came home one night and went straight to the shower, didn't even speak. I nodded slowly. And before that? He shrugged. She was already pulling away. But that night changed something. I moved through the apartment like I was inspecting a classroom after a fight. Subtle signs, the books stacked in odd places, a jacket on the back of the chair instead of the closet. Her car was gone, yes, but her favorite scarf was still here, her boots. The framed photo of her and Emma, the one I gave her for her 25th birthday, still on the end table, undusted but undisturbed. People who run don't usually leave behind the things they love most, unless they think they're coming back, or they don't know if they can. I turned back to Eric, my voice low. She didn't just leave, she disappeared into something, and we're going to find out what. He nodded slowly, still shell-shocked, but I was already scanning the space again. The principal was back, and someone had messed with the wrong girl's father. Here are chapters 15 and 16, continuing with the same emotional tone and steady, introspective voice. Eric hesitated when I asked if there was anything else. That kind of hesitation you learn to recognize when you've dealt with teenagers trying to lie their way out of detention. It wasn't the pause of forgetfulness, it was the pause of choosing what truth to leave out. Eric, I said, keeping my tone calm but steady, we're not going to find her if you keep tiptoeing around whatever it is you're not saying. He sank deeper into the couch, running a hand down his face. We fought, more than I said. How often? Often enough that the neighbors probably started recognizing our patterns. I stayed silent. Let him dig the hole on his own. Money's been tight, he muttered. My business slowed down, contracts fell through. I didn't want to worry her, so I didn't tell her at first. But then, the late notices started showing up. She found one in my desk drawer. That's when things started to spiral. And you still didn't tell me? I asked, surprised at the anger creeping into my throat. He looked up, guilty. Rachel begged me not to. She didn't want you involved. Didn't want me involved, the same way she didn't want me at her table, her holidays, her life. She said she needed to breathe, Eric continued. That was the phrase she used. Said she felt like the walls were closing in. Said she didn't feel safe, didn't feel free. I narrowed my eyes. Did she ever say she felt unsafe around you? He looked shocked. No, God, no. She just meant life, the pressure, her job, me, you, everything. She said it was like she couldn't remember who she was anymore. I leaned back in the chair. I could hear Emma's voice in the back of my mind. When someone tells you they can't breathe, you don't ask them to stay still. You help them get air. Rachel hadn't run to escape danger. She'd run to remember herself. Does she keep a diary? I asked, standing now, already scanning the apartment like a detective returning to a cold case. Eric frowned. A journal, maybe. I saw her writing some nights, but she always closed it when I came in, said it was just her thoughts. Where? I asked. He pointed vaguely toward the bedroom. Probably in her nightstand, top drawer. I walked down the hall slowly, like each footstep might trigger some memory to surface. The room smelled faintly of lavender and something else, something tired. The bed was made, sort of. Her robe hung behind the door. The drawer creaked slightly when I pulled it open. There it was, a soft green notebook, worn at the edges, no lock, no title, just her initials in tiny ink in the bottom corner. I brought it back to the living room and sat across from Eric. I'm reading it, I said. If you've got a problem with that, now's the time. He said nothing. I opened it carefully. Her handwriting hadn't changed much, still sharp, still looped on the R's. The first few entries were harmless, mundane things about work meetings, grocery lists, weekend plans. But then the tone shifted. I don't know who I am when I'm not managing someone else's expectations. Some days I wish I could just walk out the door and start over. Just me. No past, no pressure. Eric doesn't listen when I talk. He nods, but it's like he's waiting for me to be done so he can talk again. I feel like a guest in my own relationship. I kept reading. Dad sent a birthday gift, quilt from Mom's old fabric. I didn't open it right away. I didn't want to feel anything. But I did. God, I did. I cried over every stitch. My hands froze. Eric leaned forward. What is it? I shook my head slightly, still reading. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to just disappear. No note, no drama, just peace. A cabin, a coastline, just me, breathing. I closed the journal slowly. My eyes stung, but I blinked it back. She didn't leave on impulse, I said. She planned this in her heart long before she turned the key in that ignition. Eric looked like he might break apart, but I wasn't focused on him anymore. Rachel had left breadcrumbs. Now it was time to follow them. Eric sat hunched over on the edge of the couch, elbows on knees, head in his hands. He hadn't said a word since I read the journal aloud. His chest rose and fell in short, shallow breaths, like the weight of what he'd heard was too much to carry. I didn't know, he said finally, voice barely more than a breath. I thought she was just going through a phase, stress, a rough patch. You knew more than you admitted, I replied gently, but you didn't know how far it had gone. He nodded, then shook his head, then nodded again, like grief and guilt were playing tug-of-war inside him. She deserved better than me, he whispered. I told myself I was being strong for her, but I was just present, not really with her, you know? I let her carry too much alone. I thought not talking about things made them go away. It never does, I said. I sat across from him, hands folded, heart raw. She used to hold my hand, he continued, eyes distant. Just reach for it without thinking. That stopped months ago. One night I asked her why, and she said she didn't know. I think she did. I think she knew exactly why. His voice cracked. I didn't hit her. I didn't scream. I didn't cheat. But I wasn't there, not when it counted. I watched him crumble in front of me, and for a moment I hated him for how carelessly he'd handled my daughter's heart. But I also knew he was telling the truth. Not the kind people tell to protect themselves, but the kind that breaks you wide open. You made mistakes, I said, my voice low. We all do. But she didn't leave because of you. She left for herself. He nodded, slow, like it hurt to move. I don't know if she'll ever come back, he said. I looked down at the closed journal, hand resting on the worn cover like it might still be warm. She left breadcrumbs, I said again, more certain this time. We're going to follow them. And in that moment, despite the ache in my bones, I decided something simple and quiet. This wasn't over. By sunrise, I was at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a cup of coffee gone cold. My old instincts had kicked in, the part of me that used to track down truant students and make calls to nervous parents and suspicious employers. This time, it wasn't a missing homework assignment. It was my daughter. I flipped open my phone book, yes, the paper kind. Still had Rachel's kindergarten teacher in there, for some reason. I started at the top. I called her old college roommate, hadn't talked to her in nearly a decade. She stopped replying to my messages a while ago, she said. Said she was doing some soul searching. I called her former coworker from the ad agency. She talked about quitting, he admitted. Said she wanted to write, maybe open a bookstore. Said she was tired of selling things she didn't believe in. I even called Mrs. Halpern, the neighbor who used to watch Rachel after school when Emma was in chemo. She remembered Rachel's favorite cereal. Didn't know where she was now, but cried when I said she was missing. Each call chipped away at the wall I'd let build between me and Rachel's life. I realized how much I didn't know. I used to know everything: her favorite songs, the name of her imaginary friend, which knee she scraped more often. Now I was chasing strangers' memories just to feel close to her again. I called a former yoga instructor Rachel had once posted about on social media. The woman remembered her. She was always the last to leave, she said. Used to sit quietly on the mat and stare out the window. Said she liked the quiet more than the poses. That one stuck with me. Eric stood at the kitchen counter while I made the calls, silent, holding a mug he wasn't drinking from. I dialed her high school English teacher next. Mrs. Langston. She sounded surprised to hear from me. Rachel was one of those students who made you love teaching, she said. Smart, but sensitive. She once wrote an essay about how silence isn't the absence of sound, it's the presence of fear. I hung up, eyes burning. Silence wasn't just distance. It was a message. And I was finally starting to hear it. It was a Thursday afternoon when I got the call. I'd left flyers, Rachel's photo, my number, the usual line about her being missed, not in trouble at every coffee shop, gas station, and roadside diner within 100 miles of her last known location. I didn't expect much. Most people don't look up from their own chaos long enough to notice someone else's. But the clerk at a small roadside motel did. Hi, this Thomas Miller? The voice said, nervous and raspy like she'd smoked too long and talked too little. Yes. Who is this? You left a flyer at the Wishing Well Motel off Route 16. I think I saw her. That girl in the photo. She checked in 3 nights ago. Paid cash. Didn't say much. I froze. Every bone in my body felt suddenly heavy. Are you sure? I asked. My voice cracked on the last word. She said her name was Rachel. Signed the guest book that way. Looked tired. Sad, maybe. Real polite. Asked for a corner room with a view of the woods. Left yesterday morning. Didn't say where she was headed. I gripped the phone tight. Did she say anything else? The clerk hesitated. Said she was trying to remember who she was before everything got loud. I thanked her, got the address, and hung up. My hands trembled not from fear, but from something older. Hope. The fragile, dangerous kind that could turn to dust if held too tightly. Eric offered to come with me. I told him no. This was something I had to do alone. I grabbed the photo of Emma and Rachel from the mantel and slipped it into my coat pocket. I didn't say goodbye to the house, just locked the door behind me and walked out into the morning like a man chasing his own shadow. The truck grumbled like it hadn't been started in years, even though I'd driven it just last week to get groceries. It always hated the cold. But it roared to life eventually, like it knew the weight of what it was being asked to do. I hit the highway with the windows cracked just enough to let the wind bite. The photo of Rachel fluttered in the visor, clipped in with a paperclip. Her eyes looked brighter in print than they had the last time I saw her in person. There was something distant in the way she smiled back then, like she was already halfway out the door. I kept my eyes on the road, but my mind drifted. I remembered the first time she rode shotgun legs too short to reach the floor, clutching a juice box, telling me every color she saw out the window. "That cloud looks like a bunny, Daddy," she'd shouted once, full of life. Now the silence beside me was deafening. I stopped at a gas station around mile marker 82. Bought coffee that tasted like cardboard and a map I didn't need just to feel like I was doing something. The clerk asked where I was headed. "Chasing my daughter," I said without thinking. He just nodded, didn't ask questions. Maybe he knew that kind of chase. The closer I got to the motel, the more real it became. This wasn't just an idea anymore. Rachel wasn't just a memory or a ghost in my phone. She'd been somewhere, a real place, with doors and walls and running water. She'd spoken, signed her name, slept. I turned off the main road onto a stretch of cracked pavement flanked by pine trees and silence. The Wishing Well Motel appeared like a mirage-faded paint, flickering neon sign, a soda machine that looked like it hadn't worked since the 90s. I parked out front, heart thudding in my chest. Not because I thought she was still there, but because for the first time in weeks, I wasn't sitting still. I was moving toward her. A father on the road. Still searching. Still hoping. The ocean air hit me before I even saw the water, sharp, briny, and cold enough to wake something in my lungs. I'd followed the trail from the motel to a nearby bus ticket stub Eric found tucked into Rachel's nightstand drawer. It led to a coastal town, 2 states away, the kind of place people go when they're trying to disappear, not be found. The inn sat on a bluff overlooking the sea. Old shingles, white paint peeling in strips, a porch swing creaking in rhythm with the wind. A woman behind the desk looked up when I entered, her smile polite but distracted. I showed her the photo. She didn't need to ask. "She's in room 6, the woman said, voice low. "Hasn't said much, keeps to herself, walks the beach every morning." I thanked her, but my feet didn't move at first. I stood there with the key in my hand like it was a live wire. I'd dreamed about this moment so many times. I'd react, what I'd say, whether I'd fall apart or hold my ground. Now I was here, and none of that mattered. I walked outside. The sea stretched wide and gray, wind chopping the waves into foam, and there she was. Rachel, standing at the edge of a rocky path, wrapped in a jacket too thin for the cold, hair tied back, face pale but calm. She was staring out at the horizon like she was waiting for something to rise out of it. I didn't call her name. I just walked slowly, crunching gravel under my boots. She turned before I reached her. Her eyes met mine, and for a second, neither of us breathed. She didn't run, didn't cry. She just looked at me like she wasn't sure if I was real or something her guilt had conjured. I took one more step. She said nothing, but she didn't turn away. That was enough. We sat on a splintered bench overlooking the ocean, 2 feet of space between us that felt like a canyon. The wind pulled at our coats and the waves filled the silence we couldn't find words to break. Rachel kept her eyes on the water. Her face was thinner, tired, but not broken, just worn. I wanted to say everything. That I wasn't mad, that I'd read her journal, that I knew she'd been drowning long before she left, but the words caught in my throat like stones. This wasn't the time for speeches. So I said nothing, and neither did she. It wasn't the silence of avoidance. It was the silence of weight off 2 people who had carried too much for too long and didn't know how to set it down without dropping it. She shifted slightly, just a few inches closer. Her hands were clasped in her lap, white-knuckled, like she was holding herself together. "I didn't know if you'd find me," she said finally. Her voice cracked on the last word, brittle as sea glass. "I didn't know if I should," I answered. She looked at me then, really looked, her eyes filled with something too complicated to name: shame, love, sorrow, relief. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I nodded. Not because it fixed anything, but because it meant everything. Just hearing her say it loosened something in my chest I hadn't known was wound so tight. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the photo of her and Emma, held it out without a word. She took it carefully, looked down at her mother's face, then her own, frozen in time. "I thought I lost this," she said. "No," I said softly. "You just left it behind." We sat there as the sun dipped lower, the sky bleeding into shades of blue and gold. Still not talking much, still hurting, but no longer apart. Sometimes healing doesn't come with an apology. Sometimes it comes with sitting beside someone who never stopped showing up. The sky was turning the color of wet ash by the time we walked back toward the inn. Rachel didn't say she wanted me to stay, but she didn't ask me to leave either. We sat on the edge of her small bed on one side, me on the other, as if we were 2 weary travelers trying not to disturb the peace in a too small room. I reached into my coat pocket again, pulled out a photo I'd brought just in case: Emma in her gardening hat, arms around a 6-year-old Rachel covered in mud and tulips. "She used to say you had 2 speeds," I said with a soft smile. "Fast and asleep." Rachel laughed, quiet and caught off guard, like she hadn't used the sound in a while. "I remember that day," she said, holding the photo gently. "She let me plant anything I wanted. Except tomatoes," I said. "She hated tomatoes." "She said they smelled like regret," Rachel murmured. We both laughed then, really laughed. And for a second, it was just us again. Just father and daughter with open windows and dirt under our nails. I looked down, ran a hand over my knee. "I made you a quilt," I said after a beat. "From Mom's old fabrics." Rachel didn't speak. Her face went still. "I sent it to you for your birthday. Never heard back. Thought maybe you didn't want it." "I didn't open it right away," she said quietly. "It scared me." I nodded. "I figured as much. But it was never meant to guilt you, just to reach you." She looked at me, eyes glossy. "I opened it the night I left, wrapped it around me and cried for hours. I didn't say anything, I just listened. That's what she needed. What maybe she'd always needed and I'd missed in the noise of trying to protect her from everything. I kept every card," I said, "every birthday, every crayon drawing, every glittery, half-folded mess. They're in a box in the attic." She looked down. "You never stopped being my little girl, Rachel, even when you stopped needing me." This time she didn't look away. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, her voice soft, hands clenched in her lap. "But I had to go. I had to breathe." "I know," I said, and I did. Not in the way I once thought I knew things with certainty and answers, but in the way a man knows rain is coming from the ache in his bones. Rachel took a breath. "Eric's a good person, but it always felt like I was auditioning. For approval, for a future, for peace I couldn't find." I nodded slowly. "He said you stopped reaching for his hand." "I stopped reaching for everyone's," she said, blinking fast. "Even yours." The room went still. A low hum from the heater filled the silence. "You were always there, always steady, always big. I needed that when I was a kid, but as I got older it felt like I was still being held, even when I wanted to stand up." I let the words settle, didn't defend myself, didn't interrupt. "I know you meant well. I know everything you did came from love, but it was heavy, Dad. Everyone wanted something from me. A job title, a wedding, a smile. And I didn't even know who I was anymore." Her voice trembled. "I left because I needed to find the version of me that wasn't just someone else's daughter or someone's fiancé or someone's project." She looked at me then. "I needed to remember who I was before I became what everyone expected." I reached out, slowly, and rested my hand on hers. "I don't want you to be anything but you," I said. "If that means being far away, or starting over, or walking into the ocean and never looking back, I'll still be here." She let out a shaky laugh. "Don't go quoting Virginia Woolf on me, Dad." I smiled. "Wouldn't dare." We sat in the quiet after that. Not the kind that divides, but the kind that heals. I wasn't asking her to come home. I was just letting her know the door was still open. And always would be. We were sitting by the window now, the sky outside starting to shift from gray to ink. Rachel held her tea like a shield, the steam curling up around her face. She hadn't spoken in a few minutes, just stared out at the waves, biting her lip like something was trying to climb its way out of her chest. "There's something I haven't told you," she said finally, her voice low. I didn't press, just waited. "It wasn't just the pressure," she said. "It wasn't just me unraveling." She looked down into her cup, like maybe the words would be easier to say if she didn't have to see my face. "Eric changed," she continued. "Not all at once. Not in some dramatic way. But little by little, he got colder, sharper. I'd come home late from work, and he'd start asking why I needed to stay so long. He started keeping track what I wore, who I talked to, what time I got in." I sat still. The air in the room thickened. "He never hit me," she said quickly, as if that might make it less real. "He never yelled. That's what made it harder to name. It was quieter than that. He'd twist things, make me feel guilty for needing time to myself. He called it respect, said it was just him being protective." Her voice cracked. She looked at me, eyes shining. "Eventually, I stopped trusting myself. I started wondering if I was the problem. He had this way of turning my doubts into proof." I clenched my jaw, every instinct in me screaming to go back and knock on his damn door. "He never made me feel unsafe," she added. "Just small, like I wasn't mine anymore." I reached out, placed my hand gently over hers. "You are," I said. "You always were, and you always will be." She squeezed my hand, just once, then let go. "He told me not to call you," she said, voice flat. Said you'd just make it worse. My chest ached. But he was wrong, she added, and I was too. We sat in the dark for a while after that. The heater clicked and whirred. The ocean murmured outside like it had something to say, and still, the room felt full of everything left unsaid. Rachel turned toward me, slowly, like she'd rehearsed the next words 1,000 times and never once found the courage to say them out loud. "I'm sorry, Dad." Her voice cracked, then broke completely. Tears welled in her eyes, and this time she didn't fight them. "I'm so sorry." I reached for her hand again, but she didn't notice. She was somewhere else, somewhere deep in memory, wading through guilt and regret and pain she'd been carrying alone for far too long. "I didn't know what I was doing," she said through a sob. "I didn't know who else to hurt but the one who loved me most." The words hit me like a wave, not because they were cruel but because they were honest, raw, fractured. "You didn't deserve any of it," she whispered. "You were the one person who showed up, every single time. And I pushed you away. I made you feel like you weren't wanted, and I knew it would break your heart, and I did it anyway." I didn't speak right away, didn't need to. Instead, I pulled her close, gentle, careful, like I used to when she was a little girl waking up from a nightmare. "You hurt," I said softly, my voice close to her ear. "People in pain hurt other people. Doesn't make it right, but it makes it human." She clung to me like the tide pulling against the shore, her tears soaked through my sleeve. "I thought I had to be perfect," she whispered. "For you, for Mom's memory, for everyone." "You never had to be perfect," I said. "You just had to be real." And for the first time in years, she let herself be. Not the version of Rachel that smiled for pictures or sat quietly at dinner tables she didn't want to be at, but the Rachel who was tired, scared, angry, hopeful, and finally home, not in a place, but in forgiveness. The morning came soft and gray, the kind of overcast sky that made the ocean look like brushed steel. Rachel knocked on my door just after sunrise, still wrapped in the same jacket from the night before, hands stuffed deep in the pockets like they were guarding something fragile. "Want to walk with me?" she asked. I nodded, grabbed my scarf, and followed her down the narrow path that led to the beach. The sand was damp, firm underfoot, scattered with bits of driftwood and tangled seaweed. The tide was going out, leaving long trails of foam behind, like signatures being erased. We didn't talk much, didn't need to. It was enough just to be side by side, matching steps like we used to when she was a little girl, and tried to walk only where my footprints were. Every few feet, she glanced out at the water, her eyes tracing something I couldn't see. Maybe it was the future. Maybe it was freedom. Maybe it was just the rhythm of something finally quiet. Seagulls cried overhead, and the wind pulled at our coats. We walked past a stretch of shells that looked like broken glass, glinting in the weak morning light. She stopped. "Do you think Mom would be proud of me?" she asked, barely above a whisper. I looked at her, at the tired hope in her face, the kind of question that had lived in her heart far too long. "I think she always was," I said, "even when you were lost." Rachel didn't cry this time, she just nodded, a slow, silent acceptance settling in her shoulders. As we turned around to walk back, the sun finally cracked through the clouds, just a sliver of light catching the edge of the water. It didn't last long, but it was enough to see by. For the first time in years, we walked not as two people carrying history, but as a father and daughter learning how to just be. And that was peace. We packed her things in quiet agreement. No big speeches, no promises. Just folded clothes, books tucked carefully into boxes, the green journal slipped between a sweater and a paperback like a seed being planted for later. "I'm not ready for everything," she said as she closed her suitcase. "But I think I'm ready for something." "That's all it takes," I said. "Just one step." She smiled, faint but real, the kind that didn't ask for applause, just space to grow. Eric had texted once while we were at the motel. I saw his name flash on her screen. She looked at it, then turned the phone over without replying. No anger, no drama. Just a quiet decision that said enough had been said. We checked out of the inn that afternoon. The clerk gave Rachel a warm nod, like she understood more than either of us had told her. Maybe she did. Some people just know when someone's trying to come back to themselves. The drive home was long, but lighter somehow. Rachel dozed off around the halfway point, head leaning against the window like she used to on road trips. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other on the photo of Emma still tucked in my coat pocket. When we pulled into the driveway, the porch light clicked on, triggered by the motion. The roses in Emma's garden had bloomed again, soft pink and defiant in the August heat. Rachel stood in the doorway for a moment before stepping inside. Her eyes scanned the walls, the old photos, the worn couch. "I forgot how much this place smells like home," she said. "It waited for you," I said. "We both did." She turned to me, her voice quiet but certain. "I want to take it slow. I can't promise I'll stay forever, but I want to try." "That's more than enough," I said. She set down her bag, pulled off her coat, and exhaled. Sometimes healing doesn't need a plan. Sometimes it just needs a door that was never locked. The house feels different now, not louder, not busier, just fuller. The kind of fullness that doesn't come from noise but from presence, from knowing that someone else is breathing under the same roof, from hearing the stairs creak in the morning and the kettle whistle for two instead of one. It's been months since Rachel came back. She didn't unpack everything right away, didn't even move into her old room. She took the guest room instead, said it felt like a blank page. I understood. We didn't try to return to what we were. Instead, we made new things, quiet things that felt ours. On the first warm Saturday of spring, she came out to the garden with gloves and a shovel in hand. The roses Emma had planted were already starting to bud, reaching for sunlight like they'd never stopped. "I want to plant something next to hers," Rachel said. So we did, together, daisies and peonies. A little wild, a little stubborn, just like her. She dug with care. I watered. We didn't talk much, just let the breeze do the talking. But I caught her looking at the roses more than once, a soft smile on her face. Like she was speaking to her mother without saying a word. We started a new Sunday tradition too, dinner, just us. Sometimes we cook together, sometimes she brings takeout. Sometimes we eat in silence, sometimes we laugh so hard we nearly choke. She brought over a pie last week, blueberry, slightly burnt on the edges, said she'd tried Mom's old recipe. "She always made it better," Rachel said. "She had 30 years of practice," I reminded her. "You'll get there." She grinned. "You think I'll still be burning pies in 30 years? "I hope not, but I wouldn't mind." And we laughed. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was honest. This evening, we're on the porch swing, the same one I built for Emma the summer Rachel turned 10. The wood's worn smooth now, the chain squeaks every few minutes, and the breeze carries the scent of both gardens, Emma's and Rachel's, blending like past and present, deciding to coexist. Rachel's beside me, legs tucked up, sipping tea. Neither of us says much. The sun is setting behind the trees, throwing gold across the lawn. It's quiet except for the rustle of leaves, the creak of the swing, and the occasional chirp of something nesting in the hedges. This is what peace looks like. Not silence that hurts, but silence that holds. I glance at her. She's staring out over the yard, eyes soft, face relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. "You ever think about leaving again?" I ask, not because I want her to, but because I'd rather know the truth than live in pretend comfort. She turns to me, slow and thoughtful. "Sometimes," she admits, "but then I remember what it feels like to stay, to plant something and see it grow." I nod. And we swing. No grand ending, no tied bows, just this. Me and my daughter, back where we began, but not the same. I think of Emma, of all the years between then and now, of the pain and the silence and the stubborn love that refused to die. And I say, mostly to myself, sometimes they come back. Sometimes love waits, even when the phone never rings. Rachel leans her head on my shoulder, and the porch swing keeps swaying. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.